All right, so hi.
Hello. Oh,
That could be.
we're
that
saying
could
hi
be
now.
started.
We're saying hi.
Oh no, we're not saying hi.
Yeah, no.
You said hello also.
Yeah, because you said hi.
Okay.
What?
Take 3, whatever.
Mm.
All right, so free will.
Free will.
Free will.
Free will.
Maybe we can start with the definition of free will. I think free will is the ability to choose, right? As the ability to choose otherwise, right? So if you can have, if your will is free, that's free will. So if you if you could go back in time and if you could choose differently, that should be defined as free will.
That should be the definition of free will.
That should be the definition of free will.
It's an interesting one. I've never heard of it.
What's your definition of free will?
Go back in time and then you could change your choice. That means you would have had free will at that moment.
If you could go back in time and if you have the possibility to have done otherwise.
Yeah.
That's free will.
Okay.
I think.
I think it's a good definition.
Well, what is your definition of free will?
It's not so complicated, I guess. It's just the ability to choose. And the ability to choose, I would say. The freedom to choose things that you want and also things that you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not always choosing, for me it's not always choosing what you want. Sometimes you can choose what you don't want also.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's also in my definition of free will.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess there's a lot of definitions of free will. It's probably...
And we also mean free will in like the bigger context, not in the sense of, okay, sometimes you can be constrained by situations to only have a few options, or only have one option. In that case, you might not have free will in that specific scenario. But we're talking about free will as in the free will when you're living a life, right? When you're leading a human life.
Yeah.
Do you have free will to determine your own actions, be it small actions or be it life-changing actions?
Yeah. So free will doesn't mean that you can just will into existence anything you want, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not like whatever you want, you'll get. That's free will.
It's not that. It's more, so the ability to choose, decide when you can decide, when it's possible, when it's realistic.
Mm-hmm. So there have to be a minimum of 2 choices to choose from to have free will. A minimum of 2 choices every time, right? You could have more, but a minimum of 2.
Sure.
Yeah.
You could say that.
Okay. So we're pretty clear on our definition of free time.
I think it aligns pretty well.
Yeah, free will.
Aligns pretty well.
But yeah, it's also because we've talked about it countless number of times.
A lot of times.
But yeah, so what we wanted to discuss today and is what we've already discussed.
Also countless of times.
Also countless of times. Maybe not of our own free will, but is how we think or how... I think this started like maybe... It must have been like 3-4 years ago when I first heard the argument of against free will by Sam Harris. I think it was on a podcast also, where Sam Harris was trying to argue against free will using determinism. Right?
By against free will, you mean its existence, the existence of free will. Yeah,
so saying that humans don't have free will, right? That you don't have the ability to choose your own actions. And the way that he described it, or the way that I remember it, and then we talked about it back then also, is that basically determinism, right? One thing leads to the other, and those basically all the factors that you have that influence your decision are already predetermined, right? So starting with a simple example, right? Whatever you choose is based on, let's say if you just talk about macro stuff, right? Let's say whatever you chose to have for breakfast today, right? that will depend on, let's say, how you're feeling that morning, right? And how that would depend on what you did yesterday, let's say. Or that would depend on if someone asked you out to have breakfast, right? So there's going to be a lot of different influences, and what is in your fridge, let's say, right? So a lot of different influences that make you lead to a certain decision. And yeah, the idea also, I mean, there's this one thing that, you know, like, you are a summation of all the things that have happened to you, right? So way that someone's nature develops also is how they were treated as a kid, and what kind of, you know, scenarios they were put in. So for example, if a bad, let's say, if you take the classical example of a evil person, right? You could go back in time to the point where they were a kid, and let's say we go back to the point where they did not, we can't label them as evil yet, right? Let's say they're 3, 4, right? They don't show any tendencies that are specifically evil. At some point you could go back, if you could go back in time, if you could rescue that kid, right? And you could bring him or her back to not being evil, let's say, to a good path, right? The only reason he turned evil is probably maybe because his genetic makeup could lead to that. He doesn't control that. It could be outer influences like bad circumstances, bad environment that led him to become that certain way.
Yeah.
So every decision that he made every day was out of his control, right? And that is what made him. So we can't say that he had the free will to choose what. And I mean, the classical like argument against this from a macro perspective is be that he is still in charge of what he does every day, right? What he chooses, you know, if he chooses an evil act over a good act.
Yeah.
But that is also a consequence of what his genetic makeup is, what he learns from the outside.
Yeah. I guess the argument against that is that it's like he has all these experiences and circumstances that occur in his life, right? That occur to him, you know, against him and stuff that lead up to a certain point. Let's say to that point of where he has to choose whether he's gonna do an evil thing, an evil deed, or a good deed, right? And then the argument is that in that moment he still has a choice. In that very moment, there's still the choice. That's the argument against that, you know. All these experiences still lead up to this, blah, blah, blah. But in that very moment of the first time that he does evil or good, it's still, the choice is still there, right?
Yeah,
the
exactly.
freedom of choice is still there. But it goes much deeper than that, right? It goes much deeper than that macro level determinism.
It does, but I think even the macro level argument is defensible. So before we go into the micro one, the point that you made is that at that moment when he decides to do something evil, let's say that defining factor, right? He still has free will in that moment to not do a bad thing or to do a bad thing or not to do it, right? And that we think that he has the free will, but the person that he is to decide that, his thoughts, the way that his thoughts are aligned, his personality is constructed, is all a consequence of what has happened to him in the background, right? So you might think like a child is like a mold, right? You can mold them up. However, there's a genetic makeup and then there's the environment. But at no point can the kid come independent of the genetic makeup and the environment to choose that I'm going to be this kind of person. It is that it's his genetic makeup plus the environment leads to one thing, leads to one thing, leads to one thing, leads to another, and then he is put in a circumstance where he'll choose to maybe do a bad act, right?
Yeah.
So from the macro perspective, I think that's the response to that argument that he still has the free will.
Yeah, I guess you could say that all the experiences at the very least would make his choice unfair itself, right? Once he arrives at the choice to do good or to do bad, all his experiences have kind of swayed him, has kind of, you know, stacked the odds against him so that he'll probably choose the bad, right? Even if there is the minuscule chance of him choosing the good.
Yeah, yeah,
And so you could say that that's unfair, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. That he's not in control of himself fully, because he's a summation of everything that's happened to him before.
Exactly.
Right? That's the macro perspective of it. And the micro perspective that I think is even more convincing is physics determinism, right? That every action has a determinable consequence, right? So there's randomness also, but before that, the way that this goes is that if you imagine you have a container, right? If you have a container and if you have two balls that you randomly throw in there, right? A specific velocity and a specific position, right? That they have initially when you shoot them in the box, and then you have t equals to 0, right? That's t equals to 0, and then you're gonna observe what happens, right, when time goes on. And the idea is that this whole box, right, which is representative of everything in our reality, is deterministic, right? The balls move in a completely deterministic manner. That means using the normal equations of physics, you could completely figure out how they collide, right? How they collide with the walls of the boxes, and exactly where the balls would be and what their velocity would be after the collisions at, I don't know, t equals to 10, t equals to 100, t equals to a millennia later, right? You could exactly know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? So that means every atomic interaction leads to another atomic interaction. Maybe let's not say atomic, let's not go into that scale, but
yeah. And also, if you start the experiment again, if you start the situation again with the ball at the exact same spot, position, with the exact same conditions, and you act on it in the exact same way, it's going to follow the exact same path, right?
Exactly.
That is determinism, and this is arguably true. I mean, there is like chaos theory and stuff like that, a very there are there are systems that are very sensitive to the smallest change in start conditions. That would not allow you to re-predict or to predict the path of which it takes, right? But chaos theory aside, there are a lot of macro sized things you could very accurately predict what happens, right?
But even in like the pendulum, right? So the chaos theory, like the whole inverted pendulum is an example of that, right? Yeah, that says that even slightly moving the initial conditions will lead to completely different results, right?
Yeah.
So that's like, if you slightly change something, in the future it's going to be the same, but that's still completely predictable. If we don't go into the subatomic structures of things, I think that's completely predictable how a macro scale pendulum would be.
Okay, so this is a bit of a side topic. I think chaos theory is it's a bit out of our hand right now. It's
we can come back to this.
Yeah.
But I think it's this, that if a macro level systems are like a pendulum is completely deterministic. There's no way you could have the same initial conditions and different outputs, no?
So that's the thing, right? And chaos theory, in theory, you're supposed to be able to have,
Yeah.
It's called chaos theory because even the slightest leads to a huge change in positions, right? Not even like close to what initially was. So it's almost like in theory it's supposed to be possible, and then in reality it's something different. But I kind of agree that if you actually absolutely knew the start conditions,
yeah, for
probably
sure.
like
This is assuming that you
a 3-body pendulum would go the same path.
I would argue definitely it will go if you know exactly the same initial conditions. But that's what determinism is based on, right? So the main concept is every action leads to a reaction which is determined already by the laws of physics, right? At least at the macro scale, right? And what that leads to is that, so if you think of it this way, right, that how do thoughts originate in your head, right? Thoughts which are the consequence.
Don't have thoughts in my head, man.
The thoughts that are, to have free will, you have to have thoughts, right? Let's assume that. Maybe that's we have to get into that, but you have to have thoughts, right? And to have a free thought, right? To choose to do something, right? What is going on in your head? Your head is basically just atoms, right? So it's binded by the same laws of physics that everything else is binded by, right? And if we really look at the simplistic form of what a decision might look like in the brain, it could be that it's at a neuron cell in the brain. If the charge on the neuron synapse is positive, or if it's negative, let's say it boils down to that. It's definitely way more complicated than this, but let's say if it boils down to the charge on one of your neurons being positive or negative, that makes you choose left or right or something like this, right? So whenever if I asked you to choose left or right randomly, right? If I asked you to choose now, right, and then let's say you choose one, and if we rewind back time, right, the question is, could you have chosen any differently? And the whole point being that if I rewind you back, the atomic configuration of your head would be exactly how it was before, right? Before I asked you the question. And then if we played time again, right? The reactions, whatever is going on is bounded by, okay, I ask you a question, sound waves travel from my mouth to your ear, it gets processed through all your networks and so on, right? And there's a deterministic way in which, all the atoms rearrange themselves, to process whatever I'm saying, right? It's all deterministic since, all things are deterministic by these laws, right? That means there's no way you could have, if you came to a positive charge first, there's no way you could have come to a negative charge. There's no way you could have chosen right if you had chosen left before, right?
Because it's still the same sound wave that comes out of your mouth, goes into my ear, hits the eardrum in the same vibrational frequency. That does something to the blah blah blah, the neuron here, neuron there, and then that's what makes me choose like whether to slap you or not for what you said, right? But
exactly.
But I will always slap you because it's the same.
Or you will either never.
I think I'll slap you. I'm pretty sure I'll slap you.
But the example that I think that was really interesting was that Sam Harris was like, okay, if you choose a city, right, choose a random city, right, that comes to your head.
Mumbai.
Okay, Mumbai, right. So now again, the question comes, right? So if you rewind back time to the point where I asked you again, could you have chosen a different city?
I don't know, do it.
Right?
Rewind the time.
But could you have chosen, and if you think of it, if we want to believe in free will, the answer has to be yes. You could have chosen a different one. But the point is, why would you have chosen a different one? Your brain is exactly in the same state that it was. I asked you exactly the same question. Some processing went in your head where you were like, okay, what are the cities that I know of, firstly, right? Secondly, what is the one that first comes to my head? Then you have other factors that that maybe you find that Mumbai is an interesting city or something.
I appreciate that you think that so much thought went into choosing the city Mumbai.
Yeah, but exactly. So whatever happened, it happened in a deterministic way, and there's no reason to believe that you could have chosen any different. Or that's the deterministic point of view.
Yeah. So that's like, it's what's called hard determinism, right? Everything is set. Basically, the universe is set. There isn't really any changes. There's no free will. There's no free agents. Everything is just atoms bouncing into each other, causing this, causing that, like a domino effect.
Yeah.
And that leaves basically no room for free will, for free agency.
Yeah. It's like the path of the universe has already been written with the first initial conditions of the universe, however that was, right? However the atoms were configured. Once that's set, it's set. Like whether A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D, right? And the entire fate of the universe is set from that point.
entire fate of the universe is just ABCDs.
Another thing that I was actually thinking about this the other day, and yeah, so I was convinced that okay, if this is true, then yeah, A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D, D leads to E, and so on, right? But it is possible, right? So the way that we imagine it is that okay, there's one single line of destiny that we're all just following. If one thing leads to another, one thing leads to another. There's no outer. There can't be outer because we're talking about the whole universe.
Everything
as
is
a
inner.
system.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So I was thinking it is possible maybe that we go from A to B and B to C, and it's also possible to go from B to D. That two pathways are possible, but it's just that they have to converge later.
This is very abstract. It makes it sound like, sure, B can lead to two things at the same time.
No, I don't know about the same time, but imagine. Okay, imagine if you're given state A and state D, right? And you're supposed to figure out, let's just call it state A and state C. And you're supposed to figure out what happened in state B, right? You have to solve an equation, right? And I'm saying the equation could have two possible answers that could lead to the same consequence, right? So the question is, does determinism allow for, if this thing leads to the next thing, is it possible that one thing could lead to two equally likely things that could possibly happen?
I think you're in a different realm now. This isn't determinism anymore. If you're talking about probabilities, that's not determinism. That's not the definition of determinism. So hard determinism does not deal with probabilities. Hard determinism deals with consequence after consequence after consequence, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you start talking about probabilities, you've stepped into some other realm. A universe that's not hard determinism, but probabilities.
Okay, I think this is where we cross over into randomness. I'm not sure though. But anyway, maybe we can go on to the next thing, right? So
that's hard determinism. That's a view on. That's an opinion, an idea, a philosophy that assumes or believes that free will cannot exist because the universe itself is deterministic in nature, right?
Yeah.
But there's also other views. Like you and I, we don't believe in a deterministic universe.
Yeah.
Because of things like quantum mechanics, saying that the things that happen in the quantum realm that sounds ridiculous. That's not
the quantum realm, guys.
The quantum realm. Phase 4 Marvel.
Brought to you by Zach, expert in the quantum realm.
Quantum, dude, is the quantum car or some quantum thing. All right, not the quantum realm. At the quantum level, there are things behave in a probabilistic nature, right?
Yeah.
That's what the physicists believe, right? So then, even if things are deterministic at the macro level, just because of these quantum fluctuations, these incidences at that level being random, it proves that the universe can't be deterministic fully, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So if our current understanding is correct and there are subatomic events that are actually truly random, right? Let's say the probability of finding an electron in a specific place, right? And yeah, there is a probability distribution, but let's say it's random, right? Or some other very, very important quantum events that are important to our existence are not deterministic in nature, they're random. So that means the universe can't be completely deterministic, at least.
Yeah.
That means that there is a very, very slight possibility that synapse of your neuron, which you chose to do left or right, which was positive or negative. It could be that there was a very, very small random event which caused, the charge to change from positive to negative, even though the deterministic thing wanted it to be positive, but it somehow ended up being negative because of this random event, right?
Mhm.
And then it made you choose one thing or the other,
Yeah.
right? And I think the first time we discussed this, we were coming at it from only a deterministic point of view, and we were thinking, oh, then free will cannot exist. And as soon as we realized that, oh, some events are random, we were like, okay, maybe that's how free will comes into being. But then
Yeah.
we realized,
But then we realized that randomness does not help the argument of free will at all. So what if there's random fluctuations in my brain,
yeah,
in the synapses, between the synapses? How does that help the case that I'm imparting my free will onto this situation, right? This object
Exactly.
or whatever. It doesn't, right?
what that does open up is that, okay, now there's different possibilities that can happen. That means the universe's story is not set in stone, right? Randomness can affect it to go to different branches, but the whole problem is that, okay, now that means that whenever you have to choose something, you're not deterministically bound to only choose one thing, but there is an option that it is possible that you could have chosen otherwise, right? But the problem is that that's still not of your own fruition, right? It's not
Mhm.
of your own accord that you can
Exactly.
choose
You don't choose the quantum
events.
these quantum events, right? You don't choose where your electron is gonna pop into existence,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So that also does not, even with the universe not being deterministic, it still doesn't help the argument for free will. And I think that's yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The way that I like to imagine it is that for you to have made a specific decision, right? Let's say when you chose a city, you chose Mumbai. Let's say the configuration of your head, let's say if you had chosen Paris, right? The state of all the atoms of if I could see all the atoms in your head and the precise location of every atom, every subatomic, not subatomic, but like as much as it's relevant, I could know all of that.
Mhm.
There would be a specific configuration where you would have chosen Paris. There's a specific configuration where you did choose Mumbai, right?
Mhm.
That means your brain has to converge into that specific configuration for you to have chosen Paris, right?
Yeah.
And there's no way that you could have forced your mind to converge to that atomic configuration for you to choose Paris.
Yeah, exactly. So sticking with that example, it's like before with the deterministic universe. If you asked me that question, I would say Mumbai. I said Mumbai, and if you asked me again, if we reverse time and you ask me again, I would say Mumbai again because it's the same configuration. But now, with this, accepting that randomness is existent in the universe. If you ask me that question, the first time I say Mumbai, the second time maybe I say something else, just because there's a bunch of stuff happening in my head that would be different, right? That maybe
Wait, you mean in a different setting if I asked you?
no, in
Or-
the same setting.
Yeah.
In the same setting, there's still a possibility that I would choose something else, right?
Yeah, through randomness.
Through
Only
randomness,
through
correct.
randomness.
Only
Yeah.
through randomness.
Yeah.
I would, it would affect the neurons in my head somehow, maybe, and then maybe I choose. There's a possibility. That's the whole point, right? The possibility that I would choose something else besides Mumbai, but
Yeah.
still, I don't cause those randomness, those random events.
Mhm.
There's nothing. There's no free will that does that.
Exactly. So, I mean, the fundamental assumption that we're having here is that thoughts can be translated to a state of mind. To a state of mind as in like a state of configuration of things within your head. Which, if we believe that, if thoughts originate only in your head, right? So if there is no spiritual aspect to it, that means it has to originate in your head, right? I mean, maybe there's some science out there that hasn't been discovered that, like a brains and consciousness like bends our current understanding of physics, right? That
Mm-hmm.
that it could influence atomic configurations and so on.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, but that, to date, from our understanding so far, it is maybe reasonable. It is reasonable to assume that different choices come down to actually different charges or different physical things in your head.
Prior to
Right.
the choice itself.
Exactly,
Right?
exactly. So you can't choose any random thing because you can't get your configuration of your cells and so on to be like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's basically from the micro level how you can't have free will, right? According to this argument, that you can't have free will.
So that's two. That's already two viewpoints of the universe that don't allow for for free will, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another important. So I mean, if you present this idea to to someone who's new to this, right? And of course, there's not. We don't know if this idea is correct, but it seems to us at this point um, that given if we just go from a scientific point of view that hey, thing leads to la 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 la, and based on the assumptions that we just stated, it seems reasonable to come to this conclusion, right? But if you present this idea to someone who's completely new to this, right? I wonder what we have this intrinsic, um, let's say, feeling, right, that we do have free will, that we can control, right? If I choose you, hey, raise your left hand or your right hand, choose one, right?
Mm-hmm.
You believe you can choose it, right? And I mean, even when I consciously am aware of this argument and I do believe that it makes sense, I still somehow I go about my day thinking that I have free will. And not even that, I do believe that, like it does seem like the human perception is that we do have free will, right? So what is the consequence of, firstly, what is the reaction of someone, if you tell someone who's not previously heard this argument, right? Does it seem believable? Does it seem, because I've had this discussion with many people, and it really depends on the audience. Firstly, it's okay if it's a more, let's say, they're more focused on the science part of it. They don't have any immediate rebuttals to, like, go against this this determinism thing, that they can't think of something on the spot that, okay, this goes against, that this doesn't make sense or something like this. But it's also, like, I feel like there's also this certain disbelief, right? The first reaction is always like, okay, maybe it's like a trick, that it makes sense on paper, but of course we have free will. That is the first reaction, I feel.
Yeah, I think first of all, for the people that don't find this sort of thing interesting, they might believe you, but it'll be a very quick switch to like, yeah, okay, it'll be from like, yeah, fine, that kind of makes sense in my head, all right, and then it just kind of goes back to normal, to them believing that they have free will again.
No, but this is for people who believe the argument or who are convinced by it, or those people who are completely
even
skeptical.
People who are convinced by it. Yeah, I think there can be people like this, right? People who are convinced by this when you tell them, but it just doesn't resonate with them, right? They'll be like, yeah, they'll admit that it's plausible, that that sounds, that it makes sense, and then just it kind of doesn't affect them anymore.
But I feel like it never hits home because it doesn't hit home with me either, right? That, okay, I understand that this makes sense, but you can never really, or I mean, I don't know what it would take to internalize this,
So you're kind of talking about like how even if you are convinced of it and you do find, yeah, it would never it doesn't hit home for anyone so drastically as it should, right? As it should.
Exactly.
The idea that free will doesn't exist doesn't really destroy anyone's anyone's mind as it should.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like if, like the first time I heard it, right, I was surprised beyond, because I wanted it so bad not to be true, right? I wanted to find an argument that went against this and convinced me otherwise, right? Because I knew what's at stake is literally everything, is free will, right? And yeah, so I found it extremely surprising, but maybe that's because I still admit I haven't and this is even assuming that this is true at all, right? This could be complete nonsense, but yeah, even the slightest bit of trying to internalize it is very concerning. It's very, it's something that you have to think about, that, and I think people, like, if you don't internalize it, if you just see it as like a, it's like a illusion, it's like a, not an illusion, but it's like a trick, like a math trick that you can prove 1 equals to 2, but obviously that's not true, right? So you can say on paper that you don't have free will, but like, yeah, you have free will, and I still believe that, I still believe, but that's also because of other reasons. But if you're imagining, even if it's someone like completely, with no spiritual point of view, no, an atheist person who's completely, scientific and so on, like, I don't know if it completely hits, home to them.
I guess there's just something in our brains that doesn't allow this, right? Doesn't allow the understanding, the full grasp and comprehension of the idea that you are not a free agent. Maybe it's evolutionary. Yeah, some kind of safeguard in your brain to keep you from going insane. Because this should drive people insane. It should. If you are convinced of this idea, if you're someone who, you're one of these neuroscientists that
maybe
experiment on these people and they see the proof.
But maybe it's not just this thing that goes over, like our there's a lot of stuff that happens in the universe, that in the world that we can quickly ignore, right? If something happens bad really far away, in a really far away country, we can have empathy for a few seconds. We can, most of the people, like, it's like, it's hard to have long term, you have to keep reminding yourself, because maybe evolutionarily you're designed to, focus on your own problems first, right? To deal with whatever's around you first, right? So maybe it's kind of like that. But existential stuff does exist. Like, there are some revelations that shake people up. I'm just surprised that this is not...
This is not one of them. Or maybe we need to do some digging. Maybe there are people who have gone through some existential crisis because they've heard of this theory. But thankfully we're not one of them. Also,
yeah, I mean, the aim of this podcast is not to invoke existential crisis.
You're fine, all right.
Also, this is all assuming that the math even checks out on this equation, which I don't know. I mean, so my viewpoint, that I still believe that free will exists, because that's just my internal feeling.
Because we believe in the soul, right? We believe in the existence of the soul, and the soul is this metaphysical object that would help explain the existence of free will, even with the universe being deterministic or not being deterministic. Actually, not being deterministic. Yeah, it can't be deterministic, even with the soul, right? So even with the universe being random and undeterministic, and the thing with all the atoms in your head following this domino effect, if you insert the soul into the equation, now there is an agent that allows you some kind of agency. Control on the agency. Some kind of control of the steering wheel, right?
Yeah, exactly. But what is your what is your internal feeling? Like, do you also feel that free will exists? that what's your feeling from, let's say, I feel like everyone has this feeling though. Like even the people who are, but that's to my previous point, right?
What feeling does everyone have?
That you have agency, because I feel like even if you're studying this, you have to go about your day as if you have free will, right? You cannot change this.
Yeah.
You cannot change this. But
even if you believe this, you shouldn't allow it to run your life, right? Even if you believe that free will doesn't exist, don't allow it to run your life, because it's going to lead to a very bad life.
Yeah.
You still have to get up, you still have to go to work, you still have to, do your homework, whichever, both at the same time. You still have, can't just wait around and hope that the thing is going to happen. Something is going to happen.
Yeah, but then it's a good thing that we can never really internalize this.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. It's
also, it's good that we can't internalize it because it's not proven. If it was proven, like if it was 100% certain that this was the truth, then maybe you can start thinking about, like, okay, we need to accept this. We need to come to terms with this. But if it's still open to debate and it's something as drastic, then maybe I think we can leave some room for debate. And it's good that people don't internalize it right away. Maybe there is an evolutionary, maybe there were some ancestors who realized this and internalized this and they died off because they didn't really do anything. And they didn't get to pass on their genes.
They're just in the cave, like,
yeah, exactly. You can't really do anything.
They go mad.
And our ancestors were the one who didn't internalize it, and here we are, and we have the strong urge to not internalize it. But
that's a terrible image. Just this caveman.
This is definitely not true. If there's one thing we can be certain of, this is probably not true. But what this also raises is the moral implications of all of this, right? And that's what is highly debated. That, okay, what do we do with this information, right? That assuming that this one viewpoint that we're talking about, which is hard incompatibilism, right? Right, which is the belief that doesn't lead to free will, and there's other beliefs also that.
Wait, so hard incompatibilism is the belief that the universe is not deterministic, but that even so, free will, there's no space for free will to exist. It still doesn't help the argument for free will. That's the viewpoint of hard incompatibilism, right?
Yeah, that. Yeah, so if determinism was true, then we can rule out free will. Everything is determined. But we're saying that even if determinism is not true, and randomness also plays in, or is there some third thing? I don't know. Wait, free will.
I don't know if it's a third thing. It's either random or it's deterministic.
What could be the third?
The third thing is free will. It is agency, right?
It is agency.
Because randomness, determinism, and
what
agency.
about an external control?
Oh, there's some agency in some external thing.
But then we'd have to take,
or it's a deterministic thing caused by an agent outside of the scope. But yeah, it's alright. We'll skip this.
Okay. So even with determinism doesn't exist and randomness is also there, this still doesn't, say that okay, there is free will for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
That is
hard
the viewpoint.
Hard incompatibilism, and that comes from the opposite viewpoint of compatibilism that says that determinism and free will can coincide in the universe. And this one's like we've looked it up a bit, we've researched it a bit, read up about it, and it's a bit of a doozy, yeah. Research, man. Research. It's a bit of a hard one to get your mind around. It's not so hard. It's just we're not big fans. I would say.
Hard for Zach.
We're not big fans.
Yeah, but right before we get into this, because we're not big fans of that, the moral implications of believing a hard incompatibilism,
Mm.
or yeah, highly debated because this leads to some you can that basically means that if we assume that free will doesn't exist, how can you hold anyone accountable for their actions?
Right.
Like,
So not really the moral implication, the moral implications of hard incompatibilism, but just the moral implications of the inexistence of free will.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So how can you blame anyone?
Moral implications of hard incompatibilism. This is a belief.
So just the inexistence of free will in general. And yeah, so how can you blame anyone for anything?
Exactly.
Ever.
So if you go back to that hypothetical evil person that we're talking about, right?
Mm.
Something happened in, let's say, their childhood or their genetic makeup or their day-to-day life as they were growing up that made them act this way, right? And yeah, then that's the problem. That how can you hold him accountable for?
No. So now the question is even worse, because now it doesn't even matter what stuff happened to him before. It's just the configuration of his being right before the choice, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't even obviously everything matters before, right? But you don't even have to look at that anymore. You just have to look at the right before the action, the choice, what his configuration was.
Yeah.
And then how that plays out is the reason that he chose,
Yeah.
right? And then you, from that configuration, you can just keep going back and back and back and back.
Exactly.
And you can
There's
trace
a
everything.
reason to this. There's a reason to this, and I'm sure like the first rebuttal to this would be, he had a choice. He had a choice to do. Let's come up with a hypothetical bad thing to do. What's a bad thing to do?
Hypothetical bad thing to do. The trolley problem. You know the trolley
The
problem?
trolley problem? Oh,
That-
shit.
No, not the trolley
Let's
problem.
think about
Whether
a
he
small
should
thing. Let's say
like-
stealing something.
jaywalk.
Jaywalking. Wait, it's like what? It's a fantasy crime.
Dude, don't you look down on jaywalkers? We out here,
No,
yeah?
no,
You
no,
want to
no.
get jaywalked?
Jaywalking is not a fantasy crime. Do not jaywalk. Right?
Oh, yeah, that's a fantasy
Disclaimer.
crime.
No. You even get fined around for doing that, and it's extremely dangerous. All right, do not.
Don't jaywalk. Yeah. So I think jaywalking is good because you're standing at the traffic light, and then you have to make a choice whether to walk
You have to
or
make
to
a
stand there.
Now, can we have something? I don't think
You're stealing.
jaywalking is gonna make this person evil. We're talking about a little bit high stakes.
All right, fine.
Okay, let's say corruption. What about corruption?
All right,
What
fine.
about
fine. Corruption?
money laundering?
My
money,
crime isn't
money
good
laundering.
enough.
Stealing money, like stealing large sum of
Alright, you're a
money
cashier.
from innocent people, from
You're
people.
yeah, from people
Yeah, from people. So let's say this hypothetical person called.
as opposed to animals.
Should we give him a name? Should we give him a name? Probably shouldn't give him a name. Quick, think of a name. Could you have thought of another name?
Mumbai. Mumbai.
No, Mumbai.
All right.
Okay, let's call him person A.
Person A.
Person A.
This is a terrible name.
Let's call him
This
person
is-
Z.
You
You
might
got a
as
better
well
name.
call him person. Why was the person A? What's the difference?
Alright, let's call him this. I mean, giving him a name makes it a lot more personal, you know?
Jack.
Like we can. Jack?
Yeah, call him Jack.
Alright, let's say this hypothetical person
Oh
called
my God.
Jack steals money from people who don't deserve to have money stolen from. Who no one deserves to have money
No, it's another podcast
No, it's
episode,
like-
but there's some people who deserve to get money stolen from. All right.
No, but he steals money
He
from
steals money.
innocent-
All right, from an innocent
people.
person. Yes.
Right, and let's say this had big consequences. Let's say someone really needed this money for this, right? And then for something, right? And then this guy stole it on a day, right? A day stolen. And yeah, so if we break down the character of this person, what led him to doing this? Let's say he did it on one fine day, right? One fine day he stole the money. What led him to do this, right? It is okay. Firstly, it's a build up of his character, right? He's okay with. Let's say he's okay with stealing, right? But yeah, the whole point is that what we've previously already explained, right? That his whole character build up is a consequence of what happened to him,
Mhm.
right? And what happened to him, yeah. So I was saying previously, the first rebuttal to this would be that he had the choice, right? When he was sitting there and he's gonna press this button to steal the money, right? This hypothetical stealing the money button. He could have chosen otherwise, right? He could have thought of the other families and so on, but his whole thought process is determined, is a function of who he is, right? Or what happened to him yesterday, day before, everything, right? Every single minutest of factor has led him to be this person who has a specific conscious thought, right?
Mhm.
Um,
First, he started jaywalking,
he starts
and
small.
he upgraded to stealing from innocent people.
But this also goes into, like, you know, your thoughts, right? You are not in control of your own thoughts. Like, you know, what next, what thought comes to you next, right? Is you're not specifically choosing to choose that thought. You know, you're not. Let's say you wake up tomorrow and you think I'm gonna try to be a better person, right? Where did that thought come from? Right? Maybe you're the person that you are, right? Your state of being led to that thought, and maybe you had a shitty day before, right? It's a consequence of the thing, right? So every thought that you have, like, can you choose to even have a thought that's not determined by the person that you are and what happened to you before? You know, it would involve completely stepping out of this, you know, frame of a thing that you are, right? To be completely objective and then have an original thought.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
an original thought. Yeah,
an
that's
original
the
thought.
key word.
Exactly, like
Yeah.
that is independent of all, right? Our whole process of whatever I'm saying right now, right? Every next word that comes out of my mouth, right? Why am I choosing this word instead of that, right? It's I'm not choosing. I didn't choose to use the word choose. You know, it was pre-programmed that, okay, they have to choose this to convey this kind of message and this to blah 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 blah,
Mhm.
right? So even your thoughts are a consequence of all of that, and that is what makes the character of a person. That is what leads them to do a specific thing. So this specific person, Jack, right, had to do this, you know.
Mhm.
And one interesting example, which is a bit extreme, that Sam Harris uses, where we sound like Sam Harris fanboys.
I mean, I haven't
We're
said his
not
name once.
not fanboys, but we're just giving credit from where I heard it.
I
It's
mean, we're
probably not
fans.
the best.
We're fans,
Yeah,
Sam Harris.
like, there's like
Sam Harris, we're fans, but we're not
sponsors.
fanboys.
Can Sam Harris
We're
sponsor
not
us?
fanboys.
I don't know if you can sponsor us.
No.
Okay. Yeah, he was saying like that there is this guy, and like, excuse all my details of this event, right?
Oh man. All right.
I'm gonna completely butcher it, but yeah, he killed some people, right? He killed some people, and then they found a letter later on, right, saying that he was saying that I'm having these urges of like anger. What should I do? You know, when I die, just, you know, perform an autopsy and figure out what's going on with my head, right? And according to the story, like, what they found, and they did do that, right, after, yeah, and they found that there was a tumor in a specific part of his head where you could, in his brain, where you could say that, you know, maybe this could cause change in behavior, let's say.
So, let me recap. There's this guy who killed a bunch of people, right?
Yes.
He hurt a bunch of
Get
people.
demonetized.
He hurt a bunch of people, and after they I guess they killed him, maybe.
Yeah, after he passed.
In their attempt to catch him, maybe, or something.
Yeah.
But he had written a letter beforehand, and in this letter he details that he's been having these very angry thoughts,
Mhm.
and he doesn't know what's causing them, right? And then he says in the letter that they should perform an autopsy once he's dead, right, to see if there's anything wrong with his brain. And they did, and they found that there was a tumor in his brain.
Yeah.
And so that could have been the cause of his behavior that, you know, that caused him to kill people.
Exactly. So now the question shows up that if they didn't kill him, right, and they found out that he has a tumor, would we hold him responsible for his actions? Right. So the whole argument is that, okay, now we found something that was not his, you know, he didn't make the tumor, right? He didn't choose to have a tumor, right? which led him to do these things, would we punish him, or would we remove the tumor and put him in a rehabilitation, kind of process that, okay, you're gonna be different now?
I mean, he's dead now.
He did now, but like,
Can't perform an autopsy.
could you have chosen differently and not killed him?
Okay.
But yeah, so that's like, is he held? The whole thing is that, okay, now we're faced with this consequence. We're faced with a situation where a person did something which we realized later that maybe it wasn't completely their fault. The argument that Sam was trying to make is that maybe every decision, and this is an exaggeration, but it's just a metaphor, that every decision that you make, or every is kind of like a tiny tumor in your head. It's like a tiny, like, weird, like, it was a configuration of your head, basically, right, that led you to choose a specific way. So how can you be held responsible for what you... This is like the dilemma, right? That what do you do in such a case, right? And Sam's view on this, which is also highly debated, is that we would have to completely revamp the whole law system, right? We would have to change it up to mitigate these kind of behaviors altogether, right? So if we develop some kind of like a capsule, right, which makes people more empathetic, or makes them get rid of these, excuse me, something like that.
Yeah, so the thing is that the legal system, most legal systems already have these rules in place, these laws in place that state that mentally ill people, mentally unstable people are not responsible for their actions, right? They cannot be blamed for their actions, so they don't receive the same sentence as someone who murdered someone else, blah blah blah, that sort of thing, right? So that's one example of the legal system already accounting for something like this, right? Like these mental instability cases. But now the question is even further than that. It's not just mental instability, right? It becomes everyone is just a product of their history, the product of the environment that they grew up in, all the circumstances that happened to them. Mm-hmm. So should these not be taken into account is now the moral dilemma, right? Yeah. And then it goes further than that. If free will doesn't exist because of these, there's no explanation, the idea that there's no explanation to how free will can exist with a deterministic universe or a random universe. How can we jail people then? Yeah. The legal system is flawed. Revamp it.
Yeah, but that's the question, right? That you can't, like, the first answer, even if you believe that free will is not true, you wouldn't go release everyone from jail, right?
No, I
was making this very clear by my co-host saying that we should revamp. That's not what he...
I don't know anything about the legal system. All right.
Yeah, but yeah, that's the question, right? If no one is responsible for their actions, what are we going to do?
What do we do?
That means no one's glory.
We do the thing that we're supposed to do, which is not determined by us.
Yeah. No one's glory even. No one winning an Oscar. No one Shakespeare. No one is, did this off their own accord.
Yeah. That calligraphy contest you won back when you were a kid?
Won yesterday?
Yes, not yesterday.
Won yesterday.
No, give those back. They weren't...
The prizes?
Yeah, give
I was
the prizes
meant to
back.
have those prizes.
No. It's not a product of your own
The
free
initial
will.
state of the universe was exactly set up for me to have those prizes. But yeah, so that's the whole moral... I mean... Yeah, so that's the thing, right? If you actually believe in this, then, and if humanity decides to believe in this, right, which is very far,
very far. Even we don't believe in it yet.
Yeah, then we'd have to revamp the whole system, right?
If it doesn't exist, do we have the free will to revamp the system?
No, we don't. But
will we? Maybe we'll see. In the next episode.
I mean, we contradict ourselves like constantly then, because if anyone who says, there's no free will, we need to change the law. It's like, bro,
we need.
there's no free will, but you're gonna go change the law.
We insert verb.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. But yeah, that's the whole dilemma, and what we just touched on. This is not. Do you have any more things on the morality of it? Any more thoughts? No.
No, I think
It's
it's
like,
this is,
it's like he's revamped the law,
I
guys.
think we should go back to the jaywalking example. I think it's very important. Jack needs to be taken down.
But yeah, so needless to say, this is not the only line of thinking there is
Yeah.
about free will.
Yes. There are people who believe that free will exists. I mean, that argue for the existence of free will.
Yeah,
Right.
I would say most people believe that free will exists.
Most people.
Most, if not all, like
General
yeah. If
people?
you ask the general public, if you
Yeah,
ask
of
someone
course.
on the street,
No one-
they're
no
like
one-
they're like yeah, free will
Yeah,
for
most
sure.
people don't.
Free will,
hear-
hell yeah.
I think most people don't hear these, ideas. I didn't hear it until you told it to me, like
Until I brought it upon
3-4 years ago.
to
And now I'm going
go on
insane.
YouTube.
And it is his fault. Astik Kamal
He's totally not going insane.
going crazy.
Yeah, so maybe we can touch on the other beliefs about free will.
Sort of, all right. Yeah. Compatibilism. That is, we touched on hard incompatibilism, and that stems from the viewpoint of compatibilism. And compatibilism compatibilists believe that a deterministic universe and free will can coincide together, right? And I think there are many. All these viewpoints can really branch down into much smaller viewpoints, but I think the classic compatibilist belief can be explained by saying that the definition of free will is not that you have the freedom to choose and decide, but instead to choose what you want, right? And in that case, you do have free will, because most of the time you're doing what you want, even if you're not the agent that causes the doing of what you want. You still do what you want, and if that is the definition of free will, then free will exists.
Okay, so let me recap.
Mhm.
Compatibilists are people who have the opinion that determinism and free will can both exist at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? That the universe can be deterministic and free will can still exist. So, I mean, if you think of it, most scientists would fall into this category, right? That, okay, if they believe in free will, right, because they've not thought about this, right, they believe in free will, but they also believe in determinism because, they believe in physics and so on, right? So they would fall into
Sure. I don't know if we should.
assume,
I don't know.
but
We should.
I mean,
We should
I would
speak
say
for all scientists, but yeah, this is an argument as.
yeah, basically. And what you're saying is one argument that goes in favor of this, or what they do believe, is that the definition of free will itself is different.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
The definition of free will is, as you said, that it is the ability to do what you choose,
What do you want?
what you want.
Hmm.
The ability to be able to do what you want.
Right.
Right? Which is different from the way that we would define free will.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But it is a viewpoint, nevertheless, that, for example, if I choose to turn off my computer right now, right, and I do it, right, I turn off my computer, I might be determined to have done that,
Mm-hmm.
right, because of previous actions and as the battery's running or something like this, right? But the fact that I was able to successfully do what I wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
that is free will.
Yeah.
Right.
And not even just the battery thing, or just even with the entire universe being deterministic. So even if your atoms your atomic configuration have led you to turn off your laptop, it is still what you wanted to do,
Mhm.
and hence free will exists. Just because if free will is defined in this way, to do what you want to do, if you're able to do what you want to do,
Mhm.
then that is an argument for the existence of free will and the existence of a deterministic universe at the same time.
But I mean, the first way you'd refute this is, or I think both of us would refute this, but is that free will has nothing to do with your want.
Yeah,
That's what.
yeah. Immediately that's the problem, right? Immediately is the problem is we don't agree with the definition of free will itself.
But maybe we need to look. Maybe we need to reconsider. Like, free will.
Never.
Freedom of willingness.
So yeah, so this is the
Free will
reason.
is short for freedom of willingness. I've got that down.
And dumb is short for. No. So that's the reason in the beginning I defined, when I gave my definition of free will, what I believe free will is, that it's the ability to choose what I don't want to do.
Ah, yes.
So even if I don't want to study, I still study. I don't want to eat my vegetables, I eat my vegetables. Anyway, so then,
Hence you are free.
hence I am free.
Eat your vegetables, you're free. Yeah, so wait, so repeat that point. Free will,
So
the ability to do what you don't want to do, even.
the ability to do what you want to do and what you don't want to do. The ability to choose to do
Basically, do whatever you want.
do whatever you want. Yeah.
Want or don't want.
Even the ability to do things that you have no wants or desires to do,
Yeah,
or
like me. Right?
Yeah, like
me.
directly in the middle. Like
Yeah.
to lift my hand. Oh, I wanted to do that. Never mind.
Basically, what we're saying is that the free will does not have anything to do with want. From
With
our
want.
from our
Yeah,
definition of free will,
It's more of
which we think is
Agency.
the correct definition of free will.
suck it compatibilists.
Maybe we're something. This is a very, very widely held belief. So maybe we need to introspect. If this makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Free will. So they're coming at it from point of view that free will is,
I think what they would argue is that my desire, my want, my decision to not do the thing, my decision to do the thing that I don't want to do, is a want. So I'm still doing what I want to do. You know what I mean?
what? Your decision to do the
my
thing that you
decision
don't
to
want to
think-
do is a want.
Is a want in itself, and hence you're still doing the thing that you want to do, and then that's their definition of free will. That's a bit tricky to.
Yeah.
But it is counterintuitive. The no one really, not no one, but most people don't believe this to be the definition of free will. It's not the intuitive understanding of what free will is.
Yeah. Yeah, but.
But I think it's so craftily designed, worded, that it's gonna be true in every circumstance. Just like this circumstance right now, where do the thing that you don't want to do is still a want.
I feel like coming from our perspective, this seems like almost a hacky way. If you look at the whole, imagine we run this little Lego universe, right? And there's a small character in there who is compatibilist in there, right? Let's say in his world he's a compatibilist, right? We have nothing against compatibilists. We are very happy to have a compatibilist.
You are a
fellow
tiny
on
Lego man.
the show. And refute all our arguments. But yeah, imagine you have this little guy, right, who we are completely controlling, right? Let's say hypothetically. And he agrees that, yeah, the world's deterministic. The Lego guy, because this is compatibilism. They believe that deterministic universe and free will exist at the same time, right? So this Lego guy believes that determinism is true. That means we've set in all the stuff for him to exist inside this Lego world,
Mhm.
right? But he's conscious and he's thinking that, oh, I'm gonna eat cereal,
Mhm.
right, this morning,
Mhm.
and we determined it to be that way, right? We
Mm.
determined it to be being the controllers of this Lego universe. But he, sitting on his couch, thinks that I wanted to eat the cereal,
Mhm.
and hence
I have free will.
I have free will. Even though he knows that he could have not done anything else, but he's thinking that I wanted to do this anyways. Hence, you know,
Yeah.
it's like yeah. And if he didn't end up eating the cereal, then he would have been like, I didn't want to do that anyways. You know, that's what it feels like.
It's like a sassy.
It's
It's like a sassy, sulky teenager.
Exactly. It's like
I
whatever
wanted- I
happens,
wa-
yeah, wanted that anyways. Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to.
But that's what it feels like, right?
Mhm.
That's what, and it's like, yeah, I have free will because I did this, you know, like, because there's no way you can do something. Okay, let's say if you really don't want to pick up this monitor right now and bring it to another city, right? Let's say, but you end up doing it, right? You ended up doing it because you chose to do it, right? Like, and there's no way that you could have, you know, that is within the bounds of you having free will, and you get the word. Scratch this bringing monitor to another city example. Right, we stick with the Lego one.
The Lego man is bringing the monitor to another city.
No, it's just more and more of it. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it seems like it's a sassy way of saying that, you know, I had to do this anyways.
Mhm.
You know, that hey, that is free will. It is true that, okay, if we imagine inside the mind of the Lego person, right? He believes he has free will, right? Right?
Yeah.
And he believes that he has chosen to eat the cereal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Hence, it makes sense for him to believe that he has free will.
Mm.
But he also knows that his path is determined. Like, how can these two?
Yeah, it's. Explain, Lego man.
I think
Lego
it's
man.
also because I think it's because the definitions of free wills are different. But
Yeah. So
There is-
yeah, because they can believe this because the definition of free will is different, right?
yeah. But excuse me, that's one.
So how would we refute this definition of free will?
Our definition or their
How would
definition?
we refute their definition?
Okay, let's not get into ours and theirs. This is good.
I mean, the compatibilist definition of free
compatibilists
will
versus
us.
versus us. The compatibilists versus the incompatibles.
Yeah.
That's us. The resistance.
The Incredibles.
The resistance who doesn't have free will. How would we what? How would we counter their argument? Exactly like this, showing them that hey, you're a Lego person and you're trying to be sassy.
Oh yeah, they're down now. They're gone. The compatibilists have never spoken again because of this Lego metaphor.
Wait till they hear them having to bring the monitor to another city.
All right. But yeah, I think the only way to that's the only thing to discuss between incompatibilists and compatibilists, right? Because there's no point in discussing the deterministic part of the universe. You have to convince them of the definition
Of free will.
of free will, right? So one of the crowds, one of the parties has to give way. One of them has to be wrong, or they can both be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't let go of compatibilism that quickly because there's so many people believe in it. There's some
Yeah, there's a lot
I
of
wanna look-
philosophers that hold this viewpoint, right?
yeah.
So maybe we've butchered the definition. Maybe we're looking at it at too
Too much
simple
of a
a
non-compatibilist
lens.
point of view.
Yeah,
But
too simple a lens. Too simple a lens. So how?
we need to have some compatibilists on the show. But we can also look at some other points that we had for compatibilists. Okay, maybe we can discuss this other one that we were reading before, which is the psychological reality. Yeah, so looking at our friends compatibilists, there's a couple more points, not just one, that they have, like arguments that they have to present, right? And one of them is that basically what we were talking about before, right? The perceived reality that we experience, right, is one that makes us feel that we have free will, right? So that's like an argument for that free will basically exists. You know, that determinism is true by scientific means of knowing, maybe, right? And free will is true because we experience it to be true. You know, that's one. It's like saying that, hey, this cup is red because look, it's red. You know, that's what the compatibilists also argue, I believe. And I think this has some merit to it, right? That, okay, if you look at it from an outer perspective, that it seems this way, then the first intuition is to believe that it is this way. It feels like we have free will. That why shouldn't we feel like we have free will? Right? If we didn't have free will, why do we feel like we have free will? You know, but
so it's a very intuitive view of the reality of the situation.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I can immediately think of why this. I mean, just because something seems a certain way doesn't mean it is that way, obviously, right? If you zoom into this red cup, you'll realize it's made up of I don't know, its surface is in a way that it reflects, you know, this specific wavelength, that it appears red to us, but there's no red pigment on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something like this.
Exactly.
And yeah, when you break down reality using this, you know, determinism and all that, what goes on at the bottom level, maybe it doesn't matter so much what our perception is, the way that we interact with the outside world, right? The way the way that we perceive reality is completely based on how evolution led us to be. You know, the senses that we have to observe reality are attuned to what was evolutionary pressures, led us to. Like another animal which completely sees in, I don't know, ultraviolet light. It's because they were pushed by evolutionary measures to see the world that way. And maybe they think that the world, you know, this table's purple, or, you know, purple is being what they show when they show ultraviolet.
I think everything is purple and all.
But that's a good question. Like, when they actually see ultraviolet, they don't see purple, right? They see something else. Or
I don't know.
is my purple their purple? But yeah, so I think that argument breaks down quickly if you think of it this way.
It's a very almost emotional argument. It's like, you know, this is what I perceive to be reality, and hence if this reality can exist while the universe is deterministic, why can't it be true that it exists, this free will, right?
Yeah, so that's one point.
And there's also so many circumstances, so many examples of, you know,
where things aren't like how they seem.
Exactly. For real. There's do some drugs. You start seeing things that aren't there, right?
I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know either. I've never done drugs. Ever.
So we've heard.
So I've heard from many people
on the internet. Mainly podcasters. Podcasters
Podcasters.
are all
Sam Harris says no, I'm joking. I'm sorry, Sam. Sorry, Mr. Harris. Yeah. Yeah, there's just so many examples of these situations where things aren't as they seem. So how can this be an argument for the existence of free will?
Yeah. But there's another one that could be more plausible.
Yeah, the other argument is a more theological viewpoint. So there is there are religions that believe that God has a predetermined destiny for everyone, right? God has this plan, and
God's plan. What is it called? God's plan.
God's plan.
Does it have a name in any of the? Do you know? There's a name for it, or is this God's
I
plan?
know plan, yeah, God's
God's plan.
in God's plan, God's way.
It's like that IT show where he puts on the glasses, like a bigger glasses. Got a plan.
And even with this determined path, this determined destiny set by God, He still has given us the ability to make choices that fall within the realm of His predetermined
The quantum realm.
in His within the range of His predetermined universe, right? And this I think is quite this might actually be a thing that's also held widely held by people, because a lot of religious people, I think I don't think Christians are united in this belief. I think some Christians say that we have free will completely,
Mhm.
and that God knows what's going to happen, but we still have free will, right? And then some others would say that God has a plan, and that where we also have free will, right?
The first one is compatibilist. The second one is compatibilist.
2.0. I think they're both compatibilist because they both. No, the first one is not compatibilist.
The first one
'cause
is
it's
God
not
has a plan and we still have free will. That's exactly like the Lego guy.
That's the second one, but okay. Yeah,
Right.
God has a plan, and we still have
We still have free will.
still have free will. Not really like the Lego guy, because it's more of he has a plan,
No,
but there's like wiggle room in his plan, and
he can choose what kind of cereal he wants to eat.
yeah, maybe yeah. Who knows how God has set it up, right? Maybe he's eventually you go down the path that he wants you to go down, but you can still kind of make choices here.
But
and there.
any wiggle room will cause like a butterfly effect, like
Maybe
Yeah.
he determines things.
major events.
He lets you choose, but he gives you the things to play with. You know what I mean? You still have the choice, but he determines how the universe is gonna be set up for you to make the choice, or he has determined.
Yeah, but then if you make a choice, then the universe is going to be set up differently for the next choice. If you make one choice or the other.
yeah,
Yeah. Then he doesn't command the setting anymore, because that was commanded by your first choice.
or he knows what it's gonna be.
In which case it's determined.
Yeah.
Then
Maybe-
you can't choose.
So he's determined multiple paths, maybe.
Maybe this is exactly that A leads to B and could also lead to C,
Oh,
leading to D. That thing. But I think this is a highly held view. That
yeah.
Very popular held view. That, so to summarize it, it's that there is a deterministic path laid out, but you have wiggle room in.
have some wiggle room, and you can still make choices, but God knows the ultimate path of everything, and it's predetermined, but there's still some not some, I don't know how much,
I can't fully understand this, because any wiggle room will lead to such huge deviations. That's the thing, right? Unless it's that any wiggle room will lead to big.
If he knows the choices of everything, Is it
He's got
still-
every permutation and combination.
Yeah, if he has
calculated.
every permutation and combination, he set up most of it, and now he knows every permutation and combination possible. Is that still not deterministic?
This is exactly what I was asking in the beginning. Remember, if A goes to B and it could go to C and still come back to D, something like this.
Oh, this is
You know?
kind of probabilistic then.
Yeah.
It's not probabilistic. It's it's interesting because it's not probabilistic. It requires the agent to choose.
Exactly.
The agent being us, right? So he set up the playing board.
Yeah.
He knows all the permutations, combinations, and hence everything has a path. And now it's just up to us to make the choices.
Yeah, it's like you imagine like a bunch of lines, right, of combination and of how your life could go,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got multiple plans for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Humongous amount of plans, right?
Very
Because
much.
you change one, everything changes,
Mm-hmm.
and you choose which line to go on.
Yeah. And now the thing is, he also knows what you're gonna choose, though.
That breaks the whole thing.
No, but he does know. That's God.
He does know. That's
Yeah,
God.
that's God.
Then it's like a cyclic. But some people would argue that this is still free will. Like,
It is free will.
there's the
Just because
knowledge
you know
of-
what someone's gonna do doesn't mean he's the outside actor. Over.
No, that's the question. If I leave you alone in this room and I know what you're gonna do outside, do you have free will to do it? But I already knew you're gonna do that.
As long as I made the choice itself.
And that's compatibilism, exactly. Zach's a compatibilist, confirmed.
I'm in the game, guys.
You know what I'm saying? That
Um,
you exactly
I'm
described
one of you.
exactly described what a compatibilist would say.
I mean, I didn't intend to, but
But maybe
I've
this
made
gets
the
us
choice.
closer to the understanding of how compatibilists are seeing things, right? That I left the room, you can do whatever you want. I know what you're gonna do, but you chose to do. So you have this perceived sense of free will. Now the argument is that true for free will? You know.
but why can't it both be true, right? Why can't you know what I'm gonna do, and I still have that just makes you like a god, which is what we're talking about. We're talking about God. He knows what we're gonna do, right? So if he knows what we're gonna do, that's only because he's God. We still have the choice. No one else could know what you're gonna do, right? Before you've done it, if you had the choice.
But that's like saying if destiny is written, if it's already written, then you still have but definition of free will that we were going with was could you have done otherwise, right?
You could have, because you did have the choice. God just knows that.
Or you're talking about combinations and
Yeah.
but God no but okay, let's say I I knew what you were going to do in the room, right? That means I didn't know the permutation combination. I knew that one line of what path you're going to take, right? That means you couldn't have done otherwise. That's not free will by that other definition of the incompatibilist.
But did I have a choice in the room? I had choices in the room.
You had
I had
choices, but you chose the one that I already knew you're going to choose.
Yeah, then.
That's
So,
a tough
if
one.
we go back. Do I always choose the same thing?
Given I know the same thing since always,
No,
then
no.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now you're with me, and we're in front of this room, right? You
Mm.
send me in the room.
Mm.
You know what I'm gonna do
Mm.
before I do it, and then I do it, right? And now time has passed. Now if we go back, we rewind time. We're now outside the room again. You send me in the room. You send me into the room, and then you know what I'm gonna do again, right? Because you have this ability. And
Did
then
we
I do
rewind
it.
back time? Sorry.
We did.
Yeah,
We
okay.
did. We rewinded back time.
Classic.
Outside the classic. We're outside the room again. You send me into the room.
It's rewind time.
Mark as brownie. Yeah. So we're outside the room again after we rewound time. Rewound time.
Rewounded.
Rewound time.
Rewinded.
Rewound is correct, I think. But anyway, we're back outside the room again. You send me in again. You know what I'm gonna do again, and I do the thing again. But is it a different thing? Could it be a different thing?
But that depends. Did I have that? Did I knew? I knew before sending you in, right?
For the second time.
Yeah.
Because we're back outside the room again.
Yeah.
At that first point in time, right?
Yeah.
You send me in
Again.
And then you know again what I'm gonna do before I do it, and then I do it. Could this second attempt be different from the first one? I mean, could this second action be different from the first one? Because if it could be, then it is a choice. You just know the choice somehow, because you're this magical being, right?
But you're saying even in God's plan, then if we replay the universe, it could have gone otherwise, and God would have known that then.
Yes. This requires very godlike being, which is God himself.
No, but I don't know if you want to argue this, because I think you're going behind t equals to 0. You can't do that. Like,
No, I'm not.
We're going...
I'm starting t equals to 0 is outside the room.
Okay, t equals to 0 is outside the room, and I know already I know already what you're gonna do inside the room. At t equals to 0, I know.
Yeah.
Right? Or are you saying that t equals to 0, I don't know? At t equals to 1, I suddenly know.
What does it matter?
It matters. Go along with it.
Okay.
Which one is it? 0 or 1?
We can start with t equals to 0.
Okay, I knew at t equals to 0, right?
Yeah.
That means I would always know that. Sorry to go back in time, but did I always know what you're gonna do in the room?
At t equals to 0?
No, before t equals to 0. Even.
Before t equals to 0? What
Yeah,
is 0 then?
Before we came into this in front of the room.
No, I don't know. This was your example in the beginning.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, that my answer cannot change.
Your answer cannot change?
Like, because...
That's what I'm asking. I'm asking if I could have done something else. If I could have done something else...
That depends on what I know. That doesn't depend on what I know, but I know what you're going to do.
Exactly. That's what I'm questioning. Like, if we went back in time and then I did it again, and even though you knew again what I was going to do, could I have done something differently? Because if this is true, then... No, it's like an argument for free will.
No, actually, if you go back at the beginning, an all-knowing this person being that I am has to know everything, right? So I have to know what you're gonna do inside the room even before we approach the room, right? It's already written. That means you couldn't have done differently. When time itself starts, t equals to 0, of all existence and all this godly being, if he spawns at that instant, then... and he knows everything, then it's already written. As soon as someone knows, it's written. Now, if you're asking me that, could I have known something else?
Yeah.
Then you're asking if God has the free will to write his plan. Or?
I don't follow that part.
This whole room thing. But I think this is a bigger topic.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, is it not? Because then we're going into the fundamental question that we're asking is that if someone knows what you're going to do beforehand, did you have the free will to do it?
All right, it sounds like a big question.
Right? Because if you answer yes, you did have the free will, then it's a compatibilist point of view. If you answer no, then it's a incompatibilist point of view, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a big question. We haven't talked about it before. We could probably go around and around a bit more.
Yeah, but so compatibilism, get like 4 out of 10, 3 out of 10. No, I mean, if we both actually believe in free will, then we're compatibilist in some sense also.
No, not actually, because we don't believe
In determinism.
deterministic universe.
Does it require you to believe a fully deterministic universe? Because it seems like either you're a determinist, like you think it's fully deterministic,
There's-
or not
There's
deterministic at all.
probably
You know?
things like hard compatibilist, soft compatibilist. You know.
So a soft compatibilist, but hard incompatibilist. All right, fair enough. That.
So those are some viewpoints, some ideas on free will. You
Mm.
choose or don't choose, because you can't choose.
Maybe you can't choose. Maybe you can choose.
Maybe you can. Who knows?
Maybe it's
Choose
already.
what you want. Don't choose what you want. You
Maybe
can't
it's already
choose.
written when you can choose, but you're still gonna
You
think you're
cannot
gonna choose
choose
anything.
what you want. You can do it. Do what you want. That's free will.
But we should just agree on this, that whatever the answer is, we should all go about our lives assuming that there is free will. Maybe
Most
there is.
definitely. Because, like I said, Aztec told me about this, and now I'm going crazy. I'm going insane.
But that is
Yeah, it's definitely it's not helpful whatsoever to try to live your life.
and I don't think anyone would even, okay, if someone is like, hey, there really is no free will. If someone really internalizes, then what should they do? Nothing. Right? Because it would have to be beyond reasonable doubt clear to them, right? Which is
Even if you don't,
impossible at science. where
even
science
if you
is
don't
right now.
believe, if you really internalize how you don't believe in free will, then it doesn't matter. So just do the things your free will illusion want you to do. You know, your illusion of free will wants you to do. Just do it. Why does it matter? Do it. At least feel happiness in the experience of doing the things you want to do. Right? It's at the end of the day, just be happy. And to be happy, you have to give in to the illusion of free will.
So basically, don't believe what we've said at all. All right, that sums it up. Our thoughts on free will.